So we will start at 8. Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. We will wait for like 1-2 more minutes to allow people to enter. So I will wait for like 1 more minute to make sure that people can enter. Okay, still some people are entering, but I suggest that we start. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on data-driven entrepreneurship with generative AI. So this is actually the fourth webinar in a series that we started approximately 1 year ago. So in 1 year ago, we did the first kind of session on leveraging generative AI for business applications. We did one on building startups. We did one on leveraging LinkedIn and generative AI. And so today I want to tell a bit more on data-driven entrepreneurship with generative AI. We will follow the same protocol as we did in the prior webinars. So the people that have attended prior webinars, they will know the rules of the game. But maybe for the people that are new, so I will start with a presentation where I will share some insights on how to leverage generative AI for data-driven entrepreneurship. During my talk, you can already start asking questions in the Q&A option. So you will see this is a webinar format that in the Q&A option, you can post questions. And then after I finish my presentation, Niklas will help me to go through the questions and answer as much questions as possible. So in that way, we can also have some interaction at the end. So the Q&A option is enabled. The chat option we cannot enable here in the webinar, but so if you want to ask questions, you can use the Q&A option. Okay, then I think we can start with the content. So as announced, I want today share a bit some insights on how to leverage generative AI for data-driven entrepreneurship, and actually want to kind of discuss 3 main topics. So first, I want to give some insights in how to collect data with generative AI, show you some possibilities. Next, I want to talk a bit about analyzing data with generative AI. And finally, I also want to show an example of how you can leverage data with generative AI. And actually showing or discussing these 3 different topics, I want to kind of also highlight some recent kind of developments in the field of generative AI. And I think one important development is the kind of increasing popularity of what is called agents. So that's where generative AI can kind of autonomously execute tasks. And I think another important thing that I wanted to show is that this week, ChatGPT launched a new model called ChatGPT 4.0, which should become freely available to everybody, which is actually quite exciting because it has a lot of functionality. And I've tried already to incorporate some examples that can show you the added value of using that particular model. We will also share the slides, so no need to take screenshots or whatever. We will share the slides with all the participants. And we will also record this webinar, but only I will be visible. So there are definitely not GDPR issues. And we will also send you then a link to the recording afterwards. So you will have all that information later on. Okay, so then let me go into the first part. So let me show you a bit about collecting data with generative AI. And to give a use case, so we at WHU, we have started to kind of build a data infrastructure that allows us to closely monitor what is going on in our entrepreneurial ecosystem. And that means we have carefully screened all our alumni. Leveraging LinkedIn, we have looked at which alumni have been founding companies. And we kind of took a license on Dealroom, and we have collaborated with Dealroom to kind of integrate our data platform into Dealroom. So now we have all the data kind of integrated into Dealroom, and Dealroom also provides additional data. So as you can see here now on Dealroom, we now have a kind of platform with more than 1,600 WHU alumni that jointly have founded 1,500 companies. And so this Dealroom platform allows us to have a lot of data both on the companies and on the founders, which of course is for us very interesting for our entrepreneurship activities. And just to give you an example, this kind of platforms allow us to closely monitor what is going on in our entrepreneurial ecosystem. For instance, here we made an overview of all the money that was raised by WHU alumni in Germany in 2023. And as you can see, for instance, actually 8.69% of all the funding in Germany was raised by WHU alumni, which, given that we are a very small school, only 2,000 students every year, is quite an exceptional performance. But so this kind of data allow us to really monitor what is going on. But of course, every database has limitations. So for instance, a limitation of Deal Room is that it doesn't have extensive company descriptions. It has some tags that already give you an indication in which kind of industry a company is active. But what it's missing is kind of a lengthy company description that clearly describes what the company is doing. So there, what we have tried to do is to kind of collect ourselves data about the companies. And here I just have taken as an example, one of our kind of very promising companies in the ecosystem, Upfest, and Tobias Alferoth. He's an alumnus of our school. That is the co-founder and managing director. And so he is in our D-Room database. So we have quite a lot of data, size of the company, how much funding they get. But we also wanted to get like an extensive company description. And you might have experienced that in ChatGPT or other tools, it's not always that easy to extract kind of factual information from this kind of tools. There is quite a high risk of hallucination in that case, that it makes up information about certain companies or people, or that the information is quite incomplete. So actually, if you want to get good kind of factual data out of ChatGPT or other tools, it's actually important to write a bit more sophisticated prompts. And one way of writing more sophisticated prompt is what is called chain of thought prompting. And chain of thought prompting means you give the ChatGPT or another tool an overall task, but you will also clearly describe the steps that it needs to execute this task. And as you can see here you can see the prompt. So I'm saying like, look, I'm a company analyst. I need to collect company descriptions. Can you please help me to create an extensive company description for the following company, Upfest, which is co-founded by Tobias Alferoth. But then I also instruct it the steps that it needs to follow to execute. Yeah, so I instructed go to the internet, find the necessary information, double check the collected information, and based on the collected and double checked information, write a clear and comprehensive company description. And in that way, maybe I can briefly show it, what you get out of it. You will see that actually in this way, you are able to get very extensive company descriptions where based on the prompt, it will go to the internet and look for the necessary information. So maybe to briefly show you how that looks like. So you see here I get quite an extensive description. And again, it mentions all the founders, where they're situated, what the company is doing. So you see what kind of partners they have. So in that way, you get actually a very rich company description that with a more straightforward prompt, you probably would not get. So here we see actually the power of a bit more sophisticated prompting and how it can help you. Of course, it can be in this case or in other cases that you want to write a sophisticated prompt, like a chain of thought prompt, but that you have actually not really a good idea of what steps it would need to take. Yeah, so you have a task, but you're not really sure about which steps you have to take. And if this is the case, you can actually use an alternative approach, which is called agentic prompting. And so agentic prompting means you will write a prompt where you actually want to give the ChatGPT the autonomy to think itself which kind of steps it needs to execute to do a certain task. And maybe we can go here to the actual prompts. So let me do that. Now I just have to open my ChatGPT chat. So give me 1 second. Yes. Yeah, so now I go to my ChatGPT. You see here, I have now the ChatGPT 4.0. That is the newest model that has been introduced this week. People with a pro subscription like I have already access to it, but it was announced that everybody will get access to it in the short term. So everybody actually, even for free, will get access to the most sophisticated model of OpenAI, which is quite a revolution. And so let me show you how an agentic prompt look like. So what am I writing here? So I'm saying here, look, the user will provide you a specific task to execute. Take your time and think about which steps you need to do to execute the task. Only consider steps that you can execute. Make sure to execute all the steps. Do not stop until the steps are executed. And I even give it a number of rules that it needs to follow when executing these steps. Yeah, so again, it needs to double check. It needs to take its time. It needs to continue until the step has provided a clear answer. And it needs to carefully think about which tools to use. And for instance, I'm saying you can use like Bing search so that it can go to the internet to find information. And then I give it the actual task, and again, create a detailed, extensive company description for the company Upvescope, founded by Tobias Alverrood. And then I press enter. And now it will actually first think, okay, what kind of task do I need to do? Actually, it seems to have identified that it needs to search, because here it says I'm searching different websites, and it has searched for 4 websites. And now you see again, based on collecting information from the internet, from different websites, it's actually again creating for me quite an extensive company description. And here I even get some websites from where it has found the information. And actually, as you can see here, I didn't know, that it's not a coincidence. It's actually using the podcast that we did with Tobias as a source to get information about the company. Yeah. So what I wanted to show you is that by kind of applying a bit more sophisticated prompting techniques like chain of thought prompting and agentic prompting, you can actually really use generative AI as a data collection tool. Now, of course, you could tell me, yeah, you do this now for one company, but imagine like we have a database of 1,500 companies. Does that now mean that I have to, like 1,500, execute the same prompt and every time copy paste the output in a database? And luckily, the answer is no. So it is definitely possible to kind of develop a more scalable approach. So can we kind of develop an approach where instead of I having to do this 1,500 times, that I can automate this whole process? And yes, this is possible. So that's the good news. The only thing is now we are entering the coding environment. So can you do this in the user interface? That's kind of automated execution of 1,500 times the same step? No. Here we need to use what is called the OpenAI API. And so that's the API that allows you in your coding to talk with OpenAI. And more specifically, what I have done is to create an agent that can do this for me. And actually, we have given this agent a name. It's Robert. So this is kind of part now of our entrepreneurship center. And so Robert is our agent that can investigate companies. And so Robert can talk with OpenAI. We also have given Robert a specific tool called the SERP API. And so SERP API is a tool that allows to search on the internet for information. So in that way, we can go to the internet, search information, and use that information in our large language model. And I give Robert again the same chain of thought prompt to execute what it needs to execute. And in the coding, I have kind of chained all these things together with a library called LangChain. So LangChain in Python is a very famous library nowadays to actually apply all kinds of generative AI stuff in coding. So that's what we did here. And so in the end, what I can do then is I can, in my coding environment, I can give it my database. So I can give it my 1,500 companies or whatever companies I have. I can instruct Robert for every company in the database to do the same task, and it can automatically execute it. Very briefly, just to show you, if you're interested in coding, also to show you that it's not that highly complex. So let me briefly show how Robert looks like in the coding. So I code in Visual Studio Code. So this is kind of the coding. And you see we have to give it some libraries. Let me briefly close this, that you can see it better. We have to give it our API keys. So these are the keys that allow us to talk with these different applications. Then I have to define a large language model. So that's this line of code. I have to give it a tool. So this tool to search for the internet, that's the SERP API. That's this tool. And then we have to create an agent. And then we have to tell it which large language models it uses and which tool. And then we simply have to give it our chain of thought prompts. So here we have the chain of thought prompt. And then I have created a for loop so that it can execute this prompt for every observation in my database. So here I have like 10 companies in the database. So this instruction would automatically execute it 10 times. Very briefly to show you. So if I press play here, it will start executing. And now you will actually see that this agent starts doing stuff. So the agent has now a thought. I need to find more information about the company Atheneum. It starts searching. So it's found already some information. It's again searching somewhere else. So now, quite autonomously, it starts executing steps and tasks, collecting information, trying to make sense of the information. So this is now fully automated. And this it will do for all the companies in my database. You see, it's still now working on the first company. So it's really trying to collect a lot of information so that it can actually generate, again, a very nice company description. Yeah, so that's really the power of agents. You can actually, by quite straightforward coding, create quite a nice agent that can do quite some stuff for you. So that's the nice part. Yeah. Now, to be clear, there are cost implications here. Yeah. So here we are talking with the OpenAI API. And so OpenAI charges you to use their API. So for every call that you make to OpenAI, you will have to pay money. And for instance, here, just to give an example, so here I did it for 10 companies. So for 10 companies, I wanted to create this company description, and that implied a cost of 24 cents. Now, of course, you can discuss whether that's a lot of money or not. Of course, if you, for instance, want to then do 10,000 companies, yeah, we are talking about 240 euros or dollars. So it's not for free in OpenAI. So that's something you have to take into account. If you want to use the OpenAI API, even if you have a subscription, for this kind of applications, you pay money on a usage basis. So the business model is different here. The good news is that recently there has been some breakthrough in the open source community that give you alternatives that you can use for free. And for instance, an alternative that we use is we use Llama 3. Yeah? So Llama is the open source model of Meta. So that's a large language model you can use for free. And actually you have Croc Cloud, and Croc Cloud is hosting Llama. So Croc Cloud, again, gives you an API environment that allows you to talk with the large language model of Llama, and this is for free at the moment. So here, actually, I can create 10,000 company descriptions completely for free, and actually Llama 3 now has kind of the quality standards to also already create very good outcomes. So in that way, there are now increasingly options that allow you to do this data collection for free, or at least at a very low cost. But that is, of course, then you need to try out a number of things. But in principle, it's definitely possible. Yeah, so that's simply to show you a bit what is possible now with generative AI in terms of data collection, how you can actually enrich nice databases like Dealroom with even more information so that the data even become richer. So then, of course, when you have these kind of rich data, you want to analyze them. And here, for instance, what we, of course, are very interested in is to analyze why are some companies in our ecosystem more successful than others? Why are some companies able to raise more money than others? That's what we are very interested in. And actually, the new GPT model, so the GPT-4o, gives huge opportunities for that. Namely, in the GPT-4o, we can now use the data analysts. And that means, and I will immediately demonstrate that, you can upload data, and then you can start analyzing the data by giving it prompts. Now, an important kind of remark, when you upload data in OpenAI, do we exactly know what happens with these data? Not really. Yeah. So in terms of kind of GDPR, privacy, here we use Dealroom data. So these are licensed data. Actually, I don't want to share licensed data with OpenAI. So instead of giving the real data, what I actually do is first work with kind of synthetic data. And how do I create synthetic data? I actually ask ChatGPT to create synthetic data for me. So here you see the prompt that I have used to create synthetic data. Yeah? So fake data. So I'm saying, look, create for me data on 50 hypothetical companies. And you need to create the following variables: name, headquarters, total funding, launch year, number of employees, and total. These are the kind of the names of the variables that I have in Dealroom, but now I want ChatGPT to create fake data. Let me maybe briefly show how that looks like. So then as output, I immediately get an Excel file, and I will try to show it to you. Yes, the Excel is loading. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so then simply, this is the output that I got from ChatGPT. So it's a straightforward Excel. The company names are quite straightforward, but you see it then kind of makes up cities, funding, the year they were created, and so on. Yeah? So that's actually a very straightforward way to create synthetic data. And of course, with these synthetic data, there are no data protection issues. So here I can be fully confident to upload them in ChatGPT. So that's then the next step. So now we have created our fake data, and now we can upload them in GPT. And here I use GPT-4o. And so what I do, and now let me show you how it works. I think it's nice to show that in real time. So let me briefly kind of copy paste my prompts and do it live. Yes. So I briefly have to create a new chat now. Okay. Yeah, so here we see a new chat. And so we are in ChatGPT 4o, the newest model. So that will become freely available to everybody. And so I give it now this data, these fake data. So I have to briefly upload them. So here I have my hypothetical companies, and I give it a very straightforward prompt as a starting point saying, you are an expert in econometric analyses. I want to identify significant relationship between the attached variables. Can you help me? Yeah, that is a very straightforward prompt. And so when I execute that, you will see actually that it now starts analyzing my Excel. And I will immediately explain a bit more what analyzing means. But now it starts understanding, okay, these are the columns that you have in your database. And now it says, okay, if I want to identify significant relationships, I need to do a correlation analysis, and then I should do a regression analysis. So that's finding out by itself. And it makes sense to summarize some descriptive statistics. And then it starts analyzing. So now it starts analyzing, and it's reporting me about the correlation matrix. So it's start identifying where are the highest correlations. And now it's executing a regression analysis with a very low R squared. So it doesn't seem to be that there is a lot of significant relationships in my database here. And it has the coefficient. And so here is the conclusion. The model does not significantly explain the variability in total funding based on launch year employees, latest and total number of rounds. Yeah. But so it has executed here a lot of statistical stuff, actually quite autonomously. But so what is exactly happening here? Yeah. Because you might now be a bit confused, like I thought GPT is a large language model about writing text, and now it seems to be able to do regressions. Actually, what it does is it tries to translate your instructions into coding. So this is actually a translating kind of service to translate your instructions into coding, and then it will execute the coding, interpret the coding, and then take additional steps when necessary. So what you will see now is that throughout all these output that it provides, you will see these blue signs, and these blue signs will actually show you all the code that it has used to execute it. And I remember, I'm now using fake data. In the end, of course, I want to do this analysis on my real data. But what I can do now very easily is to copy the code. Yeah? So I can now copy the code, bring it into my own Python environment, and then execute the code locally on my real data. So in that way, I can perfectly now use all the outputs that ChatGPT has created and replicate it on my real data. So in that way, you have a very kind of data secure manner to do sometimes already quite sophisticated statistical analysis. Yeah? And then the only thing, of course, that you need to do here is to go through all the outputs and every time click on the code and copy it and bring it into your own coding environment. Of course, if you have data where there are no licensing issues, where there's no confidentiality, Then you can just, of course, upload the data into ChatGPT, and it will immediately work on your own data. That will be, in terms of time efficiency, much better. But here, given the kind of specificity of the data, that's something that we don't do just to be extra safe, let's say it like that. Yeah, but in general, this tool is, of course, a very nice tool to very quickly do data analysis. And actually, it can do very sophisticated econometric analysis. So it's not just the basic stuff. If you ask it to do a lasso regression with a machine learning approach, it can actually write the code to do it and execute it. You know? So this is actually can do very sophisticated things, which is very interesting. Also for me as an academic researcher, it's actually a very powerful tool that is really changing the game, I think, also in academics, especially now because it's now becoming freely available. And before you needed a subscription version, but now everybody can use it. So that's the first example. Let me show you a second example. So based on the deal room data that we now have access to, we also created what is called a knowledge graph. So that means we have created a kind of network analysis of our founders, where they have worked, which companies that they found, who were the investors, which funding rounds did they have, in which industry did they work. Yeah? So deal room gives you access to all these data. And so you can actually import these data then in a knowledge graph. We use here Neo4j, that is one of the knowledge graphs that you can use. And then you can start kind of analyzing interesting connections between all these variables. And here I still did a quite straightforward one, but still I think for illustration purposes, it's an interesting one. So now here the question is, I want to know how many founders who have worked at McKinsey have founded a company in Berlin. Yeah, so I want to know, and this is of course about WHU founders. So how much WHU founders have worked at McKinsey and have subsequently founded a company that is headquartered in Berlin? That's an answer that I want to answer. And so in Neo4j, if you want to answer that question, you have to write a specific type of code, which is called cypher code. So cypher code is the coding in Neo4j that you need to use to answer this question. And so here you see actually the coding that you need to write. Now, again, I only started working quite recently with Neo4j, so cypher code is new for me. I don't want to spend too much time in learning it. But again, a great tool now to actually quickly start writing cypher code is ChatGPT. Again, ChatGPT is a great translator, not only between Dutch and French language, but also between English and cypher codes or English and Python codes. Yeah? So it's a translator that can easily translate human language into coding language. So what did we do? Actually, here I've written a prompt where I want to kind of ask ChatGPT to write the code to execute this question. Yeah? So how many founders that have worked at McKinsey have founded a company headquartered in Berlin? I now want actually to ask ChatGPT to translate that question into cypher code. And so how do I do that? So here you see the prompt. Yeah, so here I give an overall instruction, generate cypher statement. I give it some specific instructions. I also give it, and this is simply from Neo4j, all the variables that we have in this knowledge graph. So this is simply a dump of all the variables. And then I actually also give it a number of examples. So I'm actually here within the prompt, I'm learning ChatGPT how it can translate text into cypher codes. And this is what is called few-shot prompting. So if you hear few-shot prompting, that's a fancy word for simply saying you will give in your prompt examples of what you want as output. Yeah, so here I've given it some straightforward instructions and the related cypher codes. And then at the end of the prompt, I'm saying, okay, here you have examples. Now you need to create the cypher code for this question. And then it executes, and here it creates for me that cypher code. And now I can copy that code, and I can maybe show it to you. I think if I have my Neo4j open, let me briefly double check if I can find it here quickly. No, I don't have it open, but then I can just copy paste that code into my Neo4j, and then it will perfectly give me a good answer. Yeah? So then it will here give me the answer of how many companies have founders that worked at McKinsey and that are headquartered in Berlin. Yeah? So that's kind of a first thing you can do. Of course, that still requires some steps. Yeah? So it's like you go to ChatGPT, you have this extensive prompt, then you get the output, you have to copy paste it, go back to Neo4j and execute it. That's not really very friendly. But luckily, again, you can create agents to automate this process. Yeah? So we have a second agent at our entrepreneurship center called, that we call Melissa. And so Melissa is our knowledge graph translator. And so Melissa has, again, access to the OpenAI API. We also give access to Neo4j, so to our knowledge graph. And we use Streamlit to kind of build an easy application. And again, we give it access to this sophisticated prompt, and we chain everything together with LangChain. And how does that then look like? So this is the Streamlit application. Let me maybe show it you live. And now I have to briefly search where I have it because I have already quite some windows open, but here, let me see if I can easily find it. Yes, so here is our web application. So this is Melissa. And now I can chat with Melissa. So I can ask again, how many founders have worked at McKinsey and have founded a company in Berlin. And now I press enter, and you see now it says running. So now Melissa is acting. Now I have to still do submit. And now actually what Melissa does behind the back is again use that extensive prompt that I have to translate human knowledge into cypher code and then execute the cypher code and hopefully give me an answer. We have to see, but indeed the response is, and I know that's accurate. And so she's saying there are 52 founders that have worked at McKinsey. And so in this way, you can actually build a chatbot where you can allow people to chat with this kind of knowledge graphs, asking quite complex questions about relationships in the network. So this is actually quite a powerful tool where you have kind of used an agent as a translator of human knowledge into cypher code, execute the cypher code, and give you an answer. So this is kind of the power that you have with using this kind of agents, that you can start automating a lot of tasks. Yeah, so these were two examples about how to kind of start using generative AI for data analysis. And as a final example, I want to show you an example about, in the end, if you have a lot of data, what can you do with that kind of data? How can generative AI be interesting? And here I want to show an example that I recently developed for BASF, the huge chemical company in Germany. And so here kind of the exercise was, BASF has a lot of patents, and they apply for a lot of patents. And the challenge was a bit, can we use patents to brainstorm about new product opportunities for BASF? So what did I do? I went to the German patent database. This is a freely available database, so all of you can go to that database and kind of query for patents. So what did I do here? I simply queried for patents of BASF on the topic of packaging. And in the end, it turns out that BASF has 381 patents on packaging. So that's kind of the starting data. And then you can download a PDF with all the patents and the descriptions. So then you have all the text. So here you see it. That's a kind of an Excel that you get with the title, the patent number, and also an abstract of the patent. So quite insightful information. And then what I actually did was to write a more sophisticated, again, chain of thought prompt. Let me briefly show you how that looks like. So here I have uploaded my PDF. So these are the data with the patent descriptions. And then I've written quite an extensive chain of thought prompt, where I'm saying like, look, okay, I give you all these patent descriptions. Now, can you think about a job to be done with these patents? What would be the hardest part of the job to be done? What would be a specific customer segment that could be interested in that? And then based on this information and all these patterns, can you give me an example of a product that we could develop based on these patterns? Then when you have done that, search on the internet for competitors. Based on that, try to improve the product that you have created. Then critically analyze this product as a packaging engineer, improve it again, and give me the final product. Yeah? So we can now see how that looks like. And so then it starts executing the steps as I instructed it. And for instance, here you see it actually nicely uses different patterns to come up with a suggestion for a product, namely a multi-layer packaging film incorporating these patterns where you use barrier coatings, biodegradable polymers, and cold seal adhesives. And then we start optimizing this product automatically by searching for some competitors and critically evaluating it. And so then our final product description is here. Yeah, so the final product is a biodegradable and recyclable multi-layer packaging film where we leverage a number of patterns from BASF. And so just to show you how actually with a combination of rich data, in this case, pattern descriptions and a sophisticated chain of thought prompt, you can do quite sophisticated activities already. And we can push it even one step further. So what, or let me first illustrate something, because of course, here we already give quite some information. Yeah? So here we had 380 patterns. So here we come already very close to what is called token limits. Yeah? So these large language models have token limits. That means there is a restriction to how much data you can put into a prompt. And here we have an attachment with a lot of data and an extensive chain of thought prompt. So here we are actually starting to face the boundaries of what is possible. And for instance, in this model, the boundaries are 124,000 tokens. And tokens is you can almost see it as words. It's a bit different, but it's almost like number of words. But here, because we have 381 patterns, yeah, we quickly have a lot of words. So here we started facing the boundary conditions. But actually, Google has introduced its own new model called Gemini 1.5 Pro. And this is a model where you can put nowadays, at least this week, it was announced that you can actually put 2 million tokens in a prompt. So that allows you to actually just push into a prompt a huge amount of data that it then can subsequently analyze. So if you have a lot of data to analyze, actually, Gemini 1.5 Pro is quite a promising model. Here I'm actually still saying 1 million tokens, but so I think it was 2 days ago, they announced that now you can do 2 million tokens. Now, in terms of accessibility, if you're in Europe, you actually need to establish a VPN with the US because otherwise it's not yet available. But if you have a VPN and you go to the US, you can actually use it for free in the AI Studio. So then it's also a free application. And it's quite interesting to experiment with because given the huge amount of tokens, you can even now kind of upload videos into your prompt. And then it can analyze these videos as a kind of prompt input. So that's quite interesting to see. So you see that there are, again, a lot of things going on that really provide some new opportunities. We pushed it one step further. So for this exercise, so transforming patterns into a specific product, we actually created not one agent, but we created a team of agents with an application called CrewAI. And again, you need to do that in a coding environment. But so CrewAI is a library in Python that actually allows you in a very straightforward way to create a team of agents that can collaborate together. Yeah, so you see here, we have created 6 agents, one that can identify topics from patterns, one that can suggest products. Then we have a delegation manager. So that's simply an agent that can delegate tasks to other agents. We have a technical expert, we have a competition expert, and we have a finalization expert. And in CrewAI, you can code it in such a way that they can start collaborating with each other. So they can give tasks to each other, outsource activities to each other. So it's quite fascinating to see how they work together. And so you are just sitting there and watching the agents autonomously executing this task. And again, just to show you, here's a screenshot from my coding. So the coding is not very sophisticated. This is not high-level coding. It's very descriptive coding. And so you just have to kind of describe these different agents, put them together, and then they can start collaborating, which I think is quite fascinating to see. So if you are interested in this, and again, it's sometimes a bit scary to see these agents all working together and completely going kind of out of control, but it's quite fascinating to see also. Okay, so these are actually kind of the examples that I wanted to show you, to give you some inspiration, to give you some illustration. Before we go to the questions, just as a reminder, we also are organizing on a regular basis an online bootcamp. So if you want to learn more about applying these tools, if you want to get kind of the opportunity to also experiment a bit together with other people, so the next run of our online bootcamp will be in June. And so it's 3 online sessions of 2 hours every time on a Monday morning. So if you think this is relevant for you or one of your colleagues, I have here the link. Always great if you can kind of make recommendations, because this is also kind of the way we want to kind of push people to start experimenting with these tools.